The cemetery was utterly silent in the warm Philadelphia morning. The white drapes of the funeral tent billowed softly in the light breeze. The ceremony unfolded solemnly, guests dressed entirely in black, every face heavy with grief. The gold-sheened casket lay right beside the open grave, beneath it a layer of fresh cement that had just been poured. Inside the casket, Samantha Fairchild rested motionless. The powerful CEO of Vantage Tech Industries, Pennsylvania's leading tech empire. Her eyes were closed, her pale skin wax-like. Peter Fairchild, her husband, stood beside the casket with a neatly folded white handkerchief in his hand. Tears shimmered in his eyes. Pastor Samuel Green cleared his throat, preparing to offer the final prayer. Two workers stepped forward, ready to lower the casket into the grave. Then a voice tore through the air like thunder. "Stop! Don't bury her!" Everyone turned at once, stunned by the shout. Some people immediately raised their phones, recording the scene unfolding before them. At the back of the crowd, a man in a worn blue work uniform pushed his way through. His beard and hair were overgrown, his face gaunt, but his eyes were bright and unwavering. A name badge was still clipped to his chest pocket. Micah Dalton, regional manager. People stepped aside as though he were a storm sweeping toward them. Micah pointed straight at Samantha. His hand trembled, but his voice did not. "She's not dead. I'll say it again. Don't bury her." "Who is he?" someone whispered. "Is he the groundskeeper?" another murmured. "Security!" someone barked. Two guards stepped forward to block Micah, but he slipped past them, continuing ahead. The wind kicked up the hem of his uniform like wings. He stopped at the edge of the carpeted platform where the casket rested and turned to face the entire crowd. "My name is Micah Dalton," he said, breath unsteady. "Listen to me. This woman is still alive." Peter Fairchild froze. His face hardened, turning cold as stone. "Get this lunatic out of here," Peter snapped. "Sir, you must respect the dead. Samantha is my wife. She has passed. We will bury her in peace." The crowd murmured. The pastor lowered his Bible. The two workers hesitated. Micah pointed again, his gesture firm, his voice unwavering. "She hasn't passed. Someone gave her something. It slows the heartbeat. It cools the body. It fools the eye. She looks dead, but she isn't. Give her the antidote. Right now." A ripple of shock swept through the rows of mourners. "Antidote?" someone whispered. "What is he talking about?" another murmured. Camera lenses tilted forward. A reporter leaned in, trying to catch every word. Peter's face tightened with anger. "Enough," he said, turning to the guards. "Remove him." But Micah didn't move. He lifted his chin. "Peter," he said softly, as if he had known him for years, "you know what you did, and Dr. Mason Keating knows too." The name dropped like a stone into still water. Every eye darted to the left. The family doctor, Mason Keating, stood there with his stethoscope tucked into his pocket, his lips pressed tight. He looked at Micah, the way one looks at a door that should have stayed locked forever. "Pastor," Peter said sharply, "continue the ceremony." The pastor hesitated, fingers trembling on the page. Micah took a few steps closer, slowly approaching the casket. His expression softened when he looked at Samantha. "Ma'am," he whispered, almost to himself, "hold on." Then he raised his voice toward the gathering. "Check her mouth. Feel her wrist. Warm her chest. She's still here. I heard their plan with my own ears." Peter talked about a quick burial. Dr. Mason signed the papers. "Please, give her the antidote." Silence thickened. Even the white drapes seemed to be still, as though the entire cemetery was holding its breath. A woman in a purple coat stepped out from the front row. Her hand trembled. "If there is any chance," she said, "we should check." "Unnecessary," Peter snapped. Sweat shimmered on his forehead. "We've done everything possible. The doctor has confirmed it." "Let them check," someone in the crowd urged. "It costs nothing," another voice chimed in. "Just check." What had been whispers grew into a wave. Heads nodded, eyes narrowed at Peter. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Dr. Mason cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. "This is absurd," he said with a strained smile. "Grief makes strangers say nonsense. I examined her already." Micah turned to him, voice calm but resolute. "Dr. Keating, she gave you a hospital. She bought you a car. She trusted you." Something flickered in Dr. Mason's eyes. He glanced at Peter. Peter subtly shook his head. At that moment, Micah set his toolkit on the grass, knelt beside the casket, and did something simple. He removed his jacket and folded it into a makeshift pillow. "Please," he said to the pastor, "to anyone brave enough, help me lift her just a little. She needs air. Then open her mouth. One drop is all it takes." Silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against the chest. An elderly woman stepped forward. Her hair was neatly styled, her eyes brimming with tears. "I am Samantha's aunt," she said. "If there is even one small thing we can do, we will do it." The spell over the crowd shattered. Two women moved instantly. A young man in a black suit slipped a hand beneath Samantha's shoulder. The grave workers stepped back, giving space. Together, carefully, they lifted Samantha just enough for Micah to slide the folded jacket beneath her neck. Up close, Samantha looked merely asleep. Her eyelashes cast long shadows across her cheeks. The white cotton plug in her nostril stood out starkly against her pale skin. "Please remove the cotton," Micah said softly. Aunt Helen nodded. With trembling but determined fingers, she pulled the cotton free. The air seemed to shift again. Micah reached into his pocket and produced a small brown vial. It looked old, as if it had traveled many roads. He held it up for all to see. "The antidote," he said. "Her body was slowed by something toxic. This will bring her back." Peter lunged, but two mourners stepped between him and Micah. "Let him try," one said. "If it doesn't work, we bury her. But if it does, then what?" "What?" Peter spat. "Then what?" "Then we thank God," Aunt Helen said, her eyes sharp as blades. Dr. Mason's jaw tightened. "Don't put an unknown substance into—" "Doctor," Aunt Helen said, her voice low but weighty. "If you are certain she is gone, this will do nothing. Let him try." Every gaze was fixed on the tiny vial. The sun slipped out from behind a cloud, its light falling over everything, as if an invisible hand had placed it there. On the casket, on the open grave, on the man in the worn uniform who suddenly looked like the last hope any of them had. Before the story continues, if you're watching from somewhere, leave your city in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next part of this story. In your opinion, will the drop Micah is about to release truly pull Samantha back from the boundary between life and death? Or is all of this nothing more than a desperate illusion? Micah knelt down. This time, his hands no longer trembled. They were steady, as though guided by a single purpose. He twisted the cap off the vial and dipped the glass dropper into the clear liquid inside. Then he turned to Aunt Helen. "Please help me open her mouth." Aunt Helen leaned down, gently using her fingers to part the corner of Samantha's lips. The young man in the black suit lifted her shoulders a little more, so her head tilted at the right angle. Micah bent close, and almost instinctively, the entire crowd leaned with him. Peter trembled violently. "If you do this," he began, but his voice suddenly faltered, as if strangled in his throat. Micah raised the dropper, holding it directly above Samantha's mouth. "One drop," he whispered. "Come back, ma'am." He squeezed gently. A single clear droplet fell, landing on Samantha's tongue. No one breathed. Not a single leaf stirred. Micah counted silently, each number heavy as stone. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. 4, 5. A cold gust swept through the white drapes, making the entire funeral tent tremble. 6. Micah's hand began to shake. He lifted the dropper again, preparing to release another drop. "Don't you dare!" Peter screamed, lunging forward. But Aunt Helen threw out her arm, her voice sharp as a blade. "Stay where you are." Micah squeezed gently. The second drop fell, and in that fragile instant, between the droplet and Samantha's tongue, before it even touched, a tiny sound fluttered from her chest. So faint it could have been the wind, or the memory of a breath. "Was that a cough?" someone whispered, voice hoarse with fear. The drop touched down. Samantha's throat twitched, her lips parted. Then, the air in the cemetery exploded into chaos. Screams, cheers, prayers, and choked sobs blended together. Phones tilted in every direction, recording a scene no one believed they were truly witnessing. Samantha's hand twitched. Then her lips parted, releasing a faint, weak cough. Small, but sharp enough to slice through the chaos like lightning across the sky. Micah instantly leaned closer, his eyes blazing with hope. "She's coming back," he said, his voice trembling yet certain. "I told you, she's alive." Aunt Helen clasped Samantha's wrist, her face brightening like sunlight shattering the dark. "She's warm." "Oh, Lord, have mercy. She's warm again." A woman in the crowd collapsed to her knees, crying and praying, "God is great. God is truly great." But Peter, he felt nothing, his face contorted with rage. And when Samantha's body moved once more, his hand shot into his coat pocket. A small metallic object glinted in the sunlight. Micah froze. "Is that a blade? A syringe? Or something even worse?" "Stay back!" Peter roared, eyes bulging, spittle flying with each word. "She belongs beneath the ground! Do you hear me? Beneath the ground!" Two men in black suits lunged to restrain him, but Peter shoved them aside with a desperate burst of strength. The crowd recoiled. Mothers pulled their children close. The pastor dropped his Bible, his voice cracking in fear. Micah still did not move. He stood firm in the storm of people, his worn uniform dusted with dirt, his beard stirring in the cold wind. His voice rose once more, stronger, tearing through the air. "Look at her, Peter. Look at your wife." Everyone turned, and they saw Samantha's chest rising and falling, weak but unmistakable. Another cough burst out, stronger this time. Her eyelids fluttered like heavy doors struggling to open. A collective sigh rippled through the crowd, as if they had just awakened from a nightmare. Aunt Helen screamed, her voice breaking apart. "She's alive! She's alive!" Samantha's lips trembled, and a hoarse whisper slipped from her throat. "Why?" She opened her eyes, half-conscious, gazing up at the man before her. Her voice cracked apart, full of pain. "Peter, why?" In that moment, strength drained from Peter like water leaking from a cracked vessel. The metal object slipped from his hand and clattered against the cement with a chilling ring. It was a syringe filled with a murky liquid. The crowd exhaled again, but this time it was the exhale of realization. Security guards rushed in, pinning Peter down despite his wild kicking and screaming. "No! No! She was supposed to go. She was supposed to—" His screams were cut short as they locked his arms. The mask of grief he wore throughout the funeral shattered, exposing raw rage and naked ambition. Every eye turned to Dr. Mason. He had backed away several steps, his face ghostly pale, sweat beading down his temple. I diagnosed based on what I saw, he stammered. I thought she had passed. Micah's voice rang out, sharp as a blade. Lies! You helped him. You signed the death certificate knowing she was still alive. That wasn't medical error. Samantha coughed again, harder. Aunt Helen supported her. Her hair fell forward, her skin slick with sweat. But her eyes, red, fierce, locked onto Peter as if piercing through him. What did I ever do to you? Samantha sobbed. Did I deserve this? Peter lay motionless in the guard's grip. Samantha's voice fractured, each word slicing through the air like a knife. I gave you power. I entrusted you with a division of my empire. I loved you, despite my wealth. And this is how you repay me? The crowd erupted with murmurs. Some people wept. Others shook their heads in disbelief. She turned, her gaze pinning Dr. Mason. And you, she said, voice broken but icy. I built your hospital. I bought your car. I lifted you up when you had nothing. And this is how you repay me? Dr. Mason opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence admitted everything. Samantha swayed. Her strength was fading. Micah lunged forward, catching her with hands roughened by labor, yet strangely gentle. His voice was no longer thunder, but a calming wind. Easy, ma'am. You're safe now. Samantha turned toward him. Their eyes met. In her eyes, wet, fragile, yet burning, he saw gratitude so deep it could break a man. She looked past the tangled beard, the worn uniform. She saw the man who had pulled her back from death's edge. Who are you? She whispered. Why did you do this? Micah lowered his gaze, his voice rough and gravelly. Because I knew the truth. Yesterday I heard him in the car, talking about a quick burial, about silence, about how the empire would be his. I couldn't let it happen. Not again. The mourners leaned in, absorbing every word. Samantha gripped Micah's arm, her breath shaky but growing steadier. You saved me, she said, her voice cracking. You gave me my life back. Peter thrashed again, screaming in desperation. She's supposed to be mine. Everything is supposed to be mine. But his cries vanished into nothingness, swallowed by tears, prayers, and the furious stares aimed at him. In the distance, police sirens wailed. Squad cars rushed into the cemetery, red lights flickering across the stone markers. Micah, still kneeling beside Samantha, lifted his head toward the sound. His eyes burned, not with pride, but with the deep sorrow of a man who had once lost everything. Samantha saw it. She placed her hand over his, gently squeezing. Stay with me, she whispered. Don't leave my side. As the police entered the funeral tent, as one chapter slammed shut and another trembled open, Samantha Fairchild, the woman they believed dead, was breathing, and the man who had pulled her back from the grave, the worker the world overlooked, was about to change everything. After the incident, Micah was invited to Samantha's estate. The lights in Samantha's private study cast a warm golden glow, draping soft shadows across the oak bookshelves. Outside the window, Philadelphia sparkled with night lights, but in this room, the world had narrowed to just two people. Samantha poured 2 glasses of red wine and sat across from Micah. He had changed clothes, just a simple white shirt and khaki pants, but the humble air of someone who had weathered storms still clung to him. His hand trembled slightly as he held the glass. Micah, Samantha said gently, you saved my life, but I see something in your eyes. something that has never been spoken aloud. A grief so deep, you think no one can see it. Today, will you share it with me? Micah stared into the wine glass as though searching for courage in its dark crimson. A long, slow silence passed. Then he exhaled, heavy, as if releasing years of weight. "Mrs. Fairchild," he began, voice rasping, "I wasn't always like this." Samantha leaned forward slightly. Her entire soul was focused on every word he was about to say. "7 years ago," Micah said, his eyes distant as if peering through time, "I was a software engineer. Not wealthy, but comfortable. I had a wife, Emma, and a little girl named Lily. Eyes as blue as the summer sky. She was my whole world." His voice shook. He paused to swallow the lump in his throat. "We lived in a small house in the suburbs. Nothing big, but full of laughter. Lily loved to draw. She drew butterflies, our tiny house, and the three of us holding hands. I put her drawings on the fridge, swapping them out every week." Tears began to fall down his cheeks. "Then my company went bankrupt. I lost my job. I applied everywhere, sent out hundreds of resumes. But no one wanted a 40-year-old engineer in a shrinking market. Our savings dwindled. Bills piled up like mountains. Emma worked extra shifts at the cafe, but it still wasn't enough." Samantha placed a hand on the table, hesitating as if wanting to comfort him, but not yet daring to touch. "Then the fights began," Micah said, voice tightening. "Emma said I wasn't trying hard enough. I said she didn't understand. We screamed at each other while Lily sat on the stairs holding her teddy bear, crying. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I couldn't stop. I was sinking too deep." He wiped his tears, his hand shaking. "One night I came home from yet another failed interview, and the house was empty. No Emma. No Lily. Just a note on the kitchen counter." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Micah, I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted, and there's something I need to tell you. Lily is not your child. I'm sorry. Don't look for us." Samantha inhaled sharply, her hand covering her mouth. "I read it 10 times. 20, Micah said, suppressing a sob. I collapsed onto the floor and screamed. The child I rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, who called me Daddy in that tiny voice, wasn't mine." He set down his wine glass. His hands were shaking too badly to hold it. "I couldn't stay in that house. Every corner reminded me that I had lost everything. Or maybe never truly had anything at all. I stopped paying the mortgage. The bank took it back. I slept in my car. Then the car got towed. Eventually, I slept in parks, under bridges, in alleys." "Micah," Samantha whispered, tears in her eyes. "I wanted to die," he said plainly. "Many nights, I stood on the bridge, looking down at the river, thinking, just one step, and it's over. But I couldn't jump. Maybe I was a coward. Or maybe some part of me still wanted to live." "Then, 6 months ago," Micah continued, "the manager at Oakmont Cemetery needed a night watchman. No resume required. Just show up, keep the grounds safe, and clean up. They gave me a small room in the storage building. Not much, but it was a roof. A reason to go on." He looked down at his hands, calloused, scarred by long, lonely nights. "That day, when I overheard Peter and Dr. Keating talking," he said, voice cracking, "I was checking the back parking lot. It was dark. They didn't see me. I heard Peter say, 'The drug worked. She's cold now. Tomorrow. Bury her early before anyone suspects.'" Samantha gripped her chair tightly. Dr. Keating said he was scared. Peter told him, "Do it, or lose everything." Micah closed his eyes for a moment. "I stood there in the shadows, shaking. If I stayed silent, An innocent woman would be buried alive. And I remembered Emma, remembered Lily, remembered how I couldn't save what I had. I failed my family. But this time, I couldn't fail. Samantha stood and walked around to him. She knelt before Micah, an act that made the entire room seem to hold its breath. She took his hands and squeezed them. "Micah," she said, voice trembling but strong, "you did not fail. Life failed you. But you didn't give up. You saved me. You gave me a second chance. And now, let me give you the same." He lifted his head, eyes red, voice barely a shadow. "I don't deserve—" "Hush," Samantha said softly but firmly. She placed her hand against his cheek. "You deserve this. And more." They stayed like that. Two people who had been crushed by life in different ways, holding each other's hands, tears mingling. And in that moment, both of them were beginning to heal. 1 week later, the trial of Peter and Dr. Mason began. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, every corner filled with faces leaning forward as if terrified of missing even a second of the case that had shaken the entire nation. Outside, television vans lined the street, camera lenses glinting under the sun. Reporters whispered into their microphones, "The billionaire Samantha Fairchild comes back from the dead. Husband and family doctor arrested in shocking plot." Inside, Samantha entered slowly, supported by Micah on one side and Aunt Helen on the other. Her steps still trembled, but her eyes were bright and proud. She wore a simple black dress, not as glamorous as usual, but her presence alone made the entire room fall nearly silent. A ripple of unrest swept through the gallery as she sat down in the front row, her gaze locking onto the defendant's bench. Peter sat there, pale but with eyes cold as ice. The grief-stricken mask he'd worn at the funeral had vanished completely. In its place was a mocking smirk as his eyes slid over Samantha. Beside him, Dr. Mason Keating lowered his head, both hands trembling violently. Sweat soaked the shirt beneath the courtroom lights. Judge Helena Brooks, a stern woman with silver hair and glasses sharp as blades, struck the gavel. Court is now in session. The state versus Peter Fairchild and Dr. Mason Keating on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and medical malpractice. Prosecutor Andrew Callister rose, his voice clear and cutting like a scalpel slicing open the case. "Your Honor," Callister said, "this is not just greed. This is a calculated conspiracy. A husband who sought to bury his wife alive, aided by a doctor who betrayed his oath." He turned, pointing at Peter. "Their motive was control over her empire. Billions in assets, companies supporting thousands of families across this nation. But thanks to the courage of one man, this crime was stopped moments before it was buried in the ground." The crowd murmured. Many eyes turned to Micah, seated beside Samantha. His shirt was clean, his hair trimmed, but the weariness in his face was impossible to hide. He lowered his head, unused to sudden attention. The prosecutor faced Peter again. "Do you deny poisoning your wife with a compound that slows vital functions, making her appear dead? Do you deny ordering the doctor to declare her death prematurely and rush the burial?" Peter leaned forward, his voice icy. "I deny everything. This is a fabrication by a deranged drifter and a woman too weak to understand her own failing health. She was dying. I simply accepted that truth." A painful gasp echoed through the room. Samantha shot to her feet, eyes blazing with fury. "Liar! Look at me, Peter. You poisoned my food. You forced my doctor to sign my death certificate. You intended to bury me while I was alive, like trash." Judge Brooks hammered her gavel. "Order!" But the room remained taut as a snapping wire. Prosecutor Callister lifted a small evidence bag. "Your Honor, this is the substance found in the syringe beside the gravesite. Toxicology confirms it is a paralytic, slowing the heartbeat and making the victim appear dead. Only a trained doctor could verify life signs, and this doctor signed the death certificate." All eyes swung to Mason Keating. He shrank back, his face collapsing. Then he burst into tears, confession spilling out. "I was threatened. He forced me." Peter said, "If I didn't sign, he'd ruin me, my family, and my hospital. I signed because I was terrified." Samantha stared straight at Mason, her voice molten with fury. "Terrified? You let them put me in a casket. You let them lower me into a grave. You betrayed your oath. And you betrayed me." Mason buried his face in his hands, sobbing. "Forgive me. Samantha, please forgive." The prosecutor turned to the judge. "We have the toxin, the syringe, the victim's testimony, and the witness who risked his life to speak the truth." Micah froze as the prosecutor extended a hand toward him. The courtroom swiveled in unison. The whispers rose like waves. "That's the cemetery worker. The one who stopped the burial." Judge Brooks nodded. "Mr. Micah Dalton, please step onto the witness stand." Micah rose slowly, each step echoing through the dead-still air of the courtroom. He stopped at the witness stand, his calloused hands gripping the wooden railing as if to steady himself. The oath was read, and he responded in a low, steady voice, solid as stone. Prosecutor Callister leaned forward. "Mr. Dalton, please tell the court what you witnessed." Micah lifted his head. His eyes swept across the packed room, filled with people waiting to hear the truth. He swallowed, then spoke, not shakily, but heavily, honestly. "The night before the funeral, I was working the night shift at Oakmont Cemetery. Around 11 o'clock, I heard a car stop near the back gate. I went to check." The entire courtroom leaned toward him, as though afraid to miss even a single syllable. "There was a black Mercedes parked in the shadows," Micah continued. "Peter Fairchild and Dr. Mason Keating were inside. They were arguing. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but their voices were too loud." His voice strengthened, pulling everyone back to that moment. "I heard Peter say, 'The drug worked. She's cold now. Tomorrow we bury her early before anyone suspects.'" The courtroom exploded with noise. Judge Brooks had to strike the gavel repeatedly to restore silence. Micah went on, his eyes tightening. "Dr. Keating said he was scared. Peter told him, 'Do as I say, or you lose everything. Sign the death certificate. Declare she died of heart failure. No one will question it.'" He paused, his voice breaking. "I knew that if I didn't act, they'd bury her alive. So I stayed at the cemetery. When they brought the casket, I begged them to stop. They called me crazy. But I saw her finger twitch. I couldn't let them lower the casket." Tears streamed down his weathered face. "I lost my wife and daughter years ago. I was helpless. But not this time. Not this time." Soft sobs sounded from the gallery. Samantha brought a trembling hand to her mouth and whispered, "God bless you, Micah." Defense attorney Robert Finch shot to his feet, his voice dripping with disdain. "We are expected to believe the word of a cemetery worker? A man who once slept under bridges? How do we know he didn't imagine everything? Or worse, was paid to fabricate it?" Micah tensed, but he did not lower his head. "I may be poor," he said, his voice ringing through the courtroom. "I may have slept on the streets, but I do not lie. I gain nothing by lying. Only the truth needed to be spoken." The room went so silent that one could hear individual breaths. Judge Brooks nodded, her eyes razor-sharp. "The witness has testified with courage. The court will consider his statement, along with all supporting evidence. Peter suddenly slammed his hands on the table. He's lying! They're all lying! But his voice cracked, desperate, hollow, pitiful. Order in the court! The gavel struck again. As the proceedings continued, everyone in the courtroom felt it. The mask Peter had worn for so long had shattered completely. His hunger for power, the empire he had dreamed of stealing, all of it was slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, the man Peter never once acknowledged at the height of his wealth had become the key to bringing him into the light of justice. Samantha quietly lowered herself onto her seat, her trembling hand reaching for Micah's. He took it, not as victim and savior, but as two lives once crushed by darkness, now finding light in each other. And everyone in the courtroom felt it. This wasn't just Samantha's return from the dead. It was Micah's rebirth as well. The battle for justice was nearly won, but the journey of redemption, and perhaps even the journey of love, had only just begun. The trial lasted for many days. Every morning the courtroom was packed with reporters, business magnates, and ordinary citizens who simply wanted to witness the impossible with their own eyes. Samantha Fairchild alive and fighting for justice herself. Outside, news vans lined 2 full blocks. Cameras followed every step of the witnesses. Journalists whispered into microphones, and headlines blazed across Pennsylvania. From the grave to the courtroom, the astonishing return of Samantha Fairchild. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Peter sat motionless, the expensive suits he once wore flawlessly now wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. The arrogance that had sustained him for years now lay crushed under the weight of handcuffs. Dr. Mason Keating grew smaller by the day, shoulders hunched as if bearing the weight of betrayal. He avoided Samantha's gaze, murmuring prayers more than words. His fingers trembled every time another piece of evidence was presented. On the 4th day, the prosecution called a new witness. Travis Powell, Samantha's personal driver, a tall man with honest eyes. He stepped onto the stand, his voice ringing clearly. The night Ms. Samantha collapsed, I was the one who drove her to the hospital. She was breathing hard, very weak. But the moment we reached the gates, Dr. Keating told me I had to leave. He said he would handle it personally. I asked to stay. He refused. 2 hours later, he told us she had passed away. A sigh swept across the courtroom. Samantha lifted a hand to her mouth, tears falling silently. Travis bowed his head. I knew something wasn't right. She was weak, but not gone. I should have fought harder. The prosecutor nodded. You confirm that Dr. Keating attempted to isolate the victim's condition, preventing any second opinion? Yes, sir. The defense sank into their seats. Their case was crumbling as fast as a sand wall in a storm. Then the toxicology expert was brought in, presenting slides and charts. The substance in the syringe is tetrodotoxin. In low doses, it mimics death, slowing heartbeat, freezing muscles, nearly erasing vital signs. Without advanced equipment, it is easily mistaken for actual death. This was intentional. The room went silent. So silent it felt as if no one dared breathe. The judge turned to Peter. Mr. Fairchild, before sentencing, do you have anything to say? Peter stood. His face was twisted, half rage, half despair. Yes, he said, voice cracking. I have something to say. The entire room leaned forward. Peter stared directly at Samantha, eyes burning red. I used to love you, Samantha, but you loved your companies more. You loved your billions, your power. And me? I was just a shadow in my own home. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Yes, Peter said louder, fists clenching. "I wanted everything. I wanted what should have been mine. If you had to die for me to finally live like a man, then so be it." A wave of chaos erupted. Shouts, cries, gasps melding together. The judge pounded her gavel relentlessly. "Order! Order!" Samantha shot to her feet, tears streaming, but her voice fierce. "Love cannot be stolen. Respect cannot be forced. You had my trust, my home, my life, and your greed destroyed you." Peter screamed, "I regret nothing, nothing." He lunged forward, but was tackled by guards. The handcuffs clanged together in a chilling echo. Dr. Mason, witnessing everything, collapsed into his seat and sobbed. "I'm sorry, Samantha. I betrayed everything I swore to uphold. I deserve punishment." Judge Brooks rose, her voice thunderous with authority. "The court has heard enough." She looked at Peter first. "Peter Fairchild, you are guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and greed in its most poisonous form. I sentence you to life imprisonment with hard labor." Peter screamed as he was dragged away. "It was all supposed to be mine, all of it." Then the judge turned to Dr. Mason. "Dr. Mason Keating, entrusted with life, yet you aided death. This court sentences you to life in prison. You will never hold another life in your hands." Mason collapsed completely, guided away like a broken shadow. The gavel struck. Court dismissed. The gallery erupted into applause, sobs, and cheers. The entire hall seemed to vibrate with the sense that history had just been written before their eyes. Samantha sank into her seat, exhausted, barely able to lift her hand. She whispered, "It's over." But Micah shook his head, his voice gentle yet unwavering. "No, ma'am. This is only the beginning. You have your life back. The question is, what will you do with it?" Samantha turned toward him. In her eyes was a depth of gratitude that could move mountains. "I wouldn't be standing here if not for you. You had no home, no safety. Yet you gave me both. You saved me." Micah lowered his gaze. "I only did what I couldn't do before. My wife, my daughter. I failed them. But this time, I couldn't fail." Samantha took his hand, gripping firmly. "You didn't fail. You are my miracle." Around them, people crowded in to shake Micah's hand, clap him on the back, shout his name with admiration. The man who had been invisible for years now stood in the brightest spotlight. Samantha rose, still holding his hand. "You're not going back to that storage room tonight," she said firmly. "From today on, you walk with me. If I have come back to life, then so have you." Micah's throat tightened. He nodded. Tears fell. But for the first time in years, there were tears of hope. As they walked out of the courthouse with Aunt Helen, the crowd outside erupted. Cameras flashed. Hundreds of voices roared, "Micah! Micah! The man who stopped death!" And though chains had locked down Peter and Mason, another door was opening. One Samantha and Micah had never dared dream of. Justice had won. But the journey of redemption and the journey of love had only just begun. The heavy doors of Samantha Fairchild's estate opened as if welcoming a new season of life. The house that once carried the scent of morning now breathed clean air. The hallways overflowed with sunlight and hope, as though the home itself was coming back to life along with its owner. After the trial ended, after Peter and Dr. Mason were sentenced, Samantha invited Micah to stay at her estate. One quiet evening, after dinner, in her private office bathed in warm golden light, Samantha began to see Micah differently. Not just as the man who saved her life, but as a soul that had survived wounds with no name. A few weeks later, their lives slowly found a new rhythm. Micah no longer wore the wrinkled caretaker's uniform. Samantha took him shopping for new clothes. Simple white shirts, chinos, warm jackets, small things, but each carrying the message that he deserved dignity. But more important than any outfit, Samantha gave him something priceless, a purpose. At first, Micah resisted. "Ma'am Fairchild, I'm not the man I used to be. Please let me serve quietly in the background," he said, as he carried a stack of documents out of her office. Samantha simply smiled and shook her head. "You will not hide any more. You gave me back my life. Let me give you your own." So Micah began helping with small tasks at Vantage Tech Industries, moving documents, checking schedules, and organizing paperwork. He did everything with humility, walking through the halls with a small, careful posture, head slightly lowered, as if afraid of being seen. But then, something no one expected happened. One afternoon, during a tense board meeting, the main presentation suddenly crashed. The slides disappeared, the file corrupted, and panic rippled through the room while investors sat waiting. Executives scrambled. The entire room fell into chaos. While everyone rushed around, Micah stepped forward, quietly, without drawing attention. He bent over the computer. Minutes passed. His hands moved across the keyboard with a confidence no one had ever seen from him. And then, the slideshow restarted. A collective exhale burst across the room, nearly applause. "Where did you learn that?" a stunned executive asked. Micah paused for a moment. "I used to be a software engineer, before everything collapsed." Samantha looked at him, her eyes filled with pride. She rose to her feet, her voice firm and carrying through the boardroom. "From this day forward, Micah is no longer working behind the scenes. He is my special advisor, and his counsel will guide this company." The board members exchanged glances, some astonished, some skeptical, some curious. But no one dared challenge Samantha, and no one could deny Micah's skill. For the first time in years, Micah stood tall. His eyes no longer avoided others. His hands no longer shook. He was no longer the forgotten drifter. He was a man restored, a man whose worth the world had nearly buried. And with his help, Vantage Tech Industries entered a new chapter. Stronger, more humane, and forever changed. Samantha and Micah grew closer in ways neither of them had expected. The evenings in her study, where warm yellow light reflected off old bookshelves, became a quiet, comforting ritual between them. They talked about life, faith, old wounds, and the second chances they never imagined they still had. Samantha admired him in a way she had rarely admired anyone. His unpolished honesty, his quiet wisdom, and a heart so sincere it could cut deeper than any diamond. For the first time since that cruel betrayal, her heart stirred again. And in the stillest nights, Samantha secretly wished that Micah could love her, not as the billionaire woman the world saw, but as a woman trying to learn how to heal. Yet Micah never seemed to notice the longing hidden inside her gaze. He was always respectful, always gentle, always keeping a slight distance, so small, yet impossible to cross. One afternoon, while they were walking through the garden behind the estate, lavender swaying softly in the breeze, Micah suddenly spoke with a rare excitement. "Samantha, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Elena Hayes. She's kind, gentle, and she makes me smile again." Samantha's heart twisted, as if a fist had closed tightly around it. She forced herself to smile even though a wordless ache was rising in her chest. She had hoped, even just a little, something foolish and fragile, that Micah might see her the way she saw him. But reality does not lie. He loved someone else. That night, Samantha cried alone in her room. No one knew. But when the morning light came through the glass panes, she wiped her face, lifted her chin, and told herself, "If he cannot be mine, then I will support his happiness." A few months later, Micah proposed to Elena. He shared the good news with eyes as bright as they had been before the world ever heard him. And Samantha, with a heart as soft as glass, but a will as strong as steel, smiled so flawlessly that no one could see the cracks beneath the surface. "It would be my honor," she said, as she insisted on sponsoring the wedding. Her voice was warm, sincere. Except, inside, it was a delicate mixture of sweetness and bitterness. A blessing for the man she would never be able to have. The wedding day was beautiful. The garden was covered in white roses, golden drapes fluttering in the breeze like soft ribbons of sunlight. Micah stood tall in a navy suit, his solemnity never more complete than in that moment. His eyes lit up as Elena, gentle in an elegant white gown, walked toward him, each step light as the breath of early morning. Samantha sat in the front row. Her eyes shimmered as she watched the man who once stirred her heart step into a new chapter of his life. Though her heart had once longed for something different, the peace of this moment felt undeniable. When Micah and Elena exchanged vows, Samantha applauded, a sincere smile blooming on her lips. "This is what he deserves," she whispered. "Love, laughter, a new beginning." A few months after Micah's wedding, fate, as if wanting to balance everything, gently placed Samantha on a new path. At a charity gala, she met Jonathan Reeves, a well-known businessman, admired not only for his wealth, but for his humility and compassionate heart. He didn't see Samantha as the powerful billionaire everyone else recognized. He saw a woman who had survived, who had risen from her own grave, and still knew how to give hope. They talked, then they laughed. Then they met more often, and the first thing to return to Samantha's life was laughter. Their friendship slowly, naturally shifted into something deeper, a solace, an understanding, a peace she once believed she would never feel again. When Jonathan proposed a few months later, Samantha said yes, with a heart completely open. On her own wedding aisle, on her own wedding day, Samantha walked forward with the radiant beauty of a woman who had passed through darkness, yet still chose the light. In the front row, Micah and Elena sat side by side, newlyweds themselves but filled with pride, clapping as she approached the groom. This time, there were no tears of longing, no hidden pain, only gratitude, and the certainty that every path they had walked, no matter how winding, had led them exactly where they belonged. A year later, life blossomed again in the most beautiful sense of the word. Micah and Elena welcomed a healthy baby boy whom they named Daniel. Around the same time, Samantha and Jonathan celebrated the birth of their little daughter, Sophia, a gift Samantha once believed she would never have the chance to receive again. One golden evening, as sunset poured honey across the gardens of the Fairchild estate, they gathered together. Micah held Daniel in his arms, gently rocking him with the rhythm of a father who once thought he would be lost forever. Samantha pressed Sophia to her chest, resting the baby's warmth against her cheek, as if trying to imprint every fragile, perfect second. When their eyes met, tears rose quietly, not from pain, but from the miracle that they were still here, still breathing, still hoping. They remembered everything. The death that nearly claimed them, the betrayal that nearly buried them both in despair. But now, they were surrounded by laughter, by little feet kicking into the air, by the promise of the future cradled in tiny, innocent hands. Micah lifted his glass of wine, the last light of day reflecting in his eyes. From ashes to dawn, he said softly, yet with absolute conviction. Samantha smiled, her heart trembling as if reborn once more. She whispered back, her words light but resounding like an affirmation from life itself. Yes, from ashes to dawn. As the children grew and the years drifted gently by like summer wind sweeping across an open field, Samantha and Micah remained close. Not as lovers who had missed their chance in this lifetime, but as two souls forged by fire. They had walked through death and found life again. They had faced betrayal and discovered redemption. They had stood at the darkest edge of despair, only to realize that light had been waiting for them on the other side. And on soft golden evenings, when they sat together on the wooden bench watching their children chase sunlight in the garden, both of them understood one truth with striking clarity. Love does not always take the shape of romance. Sometimes it is salvation. Sometimes it is a sacrifice. Sometimes it is the healing we never believed we deserved. Their story stands as an unwavering testament that, even from the grave, hope can rise again. From betrayal, love can still bloom. From ashes, dawn will always return. It is a story about courage, about gratitude, about seeing a human being when the world has overlooked them, about saving a life, and in doing so, finding the path to saving your own. And in the end, like a gentle promise whispered back to life itself, from ashes, dawn always comes. If you've reached the end of this story, thank you for staying. I hope Samantha and Micah's journey touched you in a special way. Do you believe someone in your life has ever saved you, even with just a sentence or a small, quiet act of kindness? Share it in the comments below. I read every story you share. And if you believe in the power of kindness, in healing, and in the second chances life brings, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story that reaches the heart. See you on our next journey. Thank you for being here.